There are no propositions in the right hemisphere. It's all apposition, meaning figure ground, no connections, just juxtaposition.
Peculiar results of the telegraph was that it was simultaneous with the development of symbolism, which is a figure ground pattern problem. And Edgar Allan Poe, one of the key figures in the origins of symbolism and of great influence on Baudelaire and Europe, was very much aware of the technology of his time. In fact, in his famous story of the Maelstrom, he insisted that art made possible survival by pattern recognition. In the story of the Maelstrom, his sailor, caught in a great whirlpool while out fishing, began to study this vast thing in which he was caught, and he noticed that some things disappeared downward and other things reappeared and came up. And he attached himself to one of these reappearing objects and survived. And this is the allegory that Poe presents to the world of the function of art in society, the function of pattern recognition, and the function of anticipating effects with causes. Poe.
The TV age is not industrial, it's a software age. And it is not an age of assembly lines, but of pattern recognition.
Sure. All my methods in studying media come out of my methods of studying poetry. Without exception. All of my
in which he explains that the left hemisphere has propositions.
I'm not a sociologist.
And the right hemisphere has appositions. Left hemisphere is the figure without ground. Abstract. There is one side of the brain which is able to perform with non-gestalt, abstractly, figure minus ground. And that is called the rational side, ridiculously. It's merely the abstract side. The abstract side of the brain, the left hemisphere, is figure without ground. It is logical and lineal and connected. It has classification, places to put things. It has syntax, grammar, order, which is all figure without ground.
The period of the Civil War, the big electric event dawning on the world, was the telegraph, commercial by about 1840, and had a profound effect on news gathering.
The right hemisphere is all figure and ground, and is called intuitive, is called simultaneous, or it is not called, but they've discovered that it has these characteristics of just by rule of thumb. Fortunately, the hemispheres are not a theory. They are empirically established by the most painstaking methods. But the right hemisphere is simultaneous. That is the electric side of the brain.
Are you for or against the right or the left hemisphere?
I'm for at the speed of, by the way, simultaneous, that's the right hemisphere thing, is acoustic, whereas lineal is visual.
Right or the left hemisphere?
I'm for the underdog. Now, and remember the alphabet translated the acoustic, translated Homer, who had been recited and performed for centuries. They translated him into visual terms, lineal terms, at which point you could read him, but you didn't need any more sound effects. So Homer became very abstract. He became a literary figure, whereas up till the time of the alphabet, he had been performed operatically. And a gentleman in Greek times was a person who could perform Homer, who could sing him from one beginning to the end of the Iliad and the Odyssey. And by the way, it would be interesting to go into the nature of those poems, but they were very practical poems. They were pragmatic to the core. They had nothing fancy or literary about them. They were the day's logbook The right hemisphere is the underdog side of our world. The gifted child is a right hemisphere child, and there's no place for him in the school system. The school system is built only on the left hemisphere. Quantified, classified, graded, and so on. IQ tests are all left hemisphere tests. Einstein wouldn't have made 90 on an IQ test.
But rather than duking it out amongst one another, Santa and his former slaves decided to take it out on the public. In the early years, if a child was naughty,
Krampus. The punitive spirit who once rode side by side with St. Nicholas each Christmas Eve, delivering terrible punishment to wicked children as Claus bestowed his gifts upon the righteous.
That's ridiculous. There's no such thing as Santa Claus.
Not since he was killed by a jet in 1963, no. Nor has there been a Krampus since the Pope cast him into purgatory during Vatican II. But your boys seem to have inadvertently released him from his chains.
Dean did it. I wanted to read The Grinch.
St. Nicholas and the 6 to 8 black men would beat him with what Oscar described as the small branch of a tree.
I don't know, magic it away or something?
No more than you could science it away. No, the beast will not stop.
A switch?
Until it has punished the wicked.
Yeah, he said, that's it.
Well, there's no one wicked. We want the most. Hey, what the hell? Come for the love of the... Oh, that's the last... Okay, that's it, mister.
They'd kick him and beat him with the switch. Then, if the youngster was really bad, they'd put him in a sack and take him back to Spain.
His earthly work is at an end.
Wait a minute, St. Nicholas would kick you?
Whether Macy or somebody else sells the toy doesn't make any difference. Don't you feel that way?
Huh? Oh, me? Oh, yeah, sure.
What's she doing?
Yes?
Professor Norman, my name's Lucy. I just read all your...
Can you fly that thing?
Not yet.
Operator.
Tank, I need a pilot program for a B-212 helicopter. Hurry. Research on the human brain. It's a little rudimentary, but you're on the right track.
Thank you.
Learning our history. The last 5,000.
Been through 2,500 years of phonetic literacy, only to encounter the end of the road. Right now, the people in this room are making the decision whether or not we're going to have any more literacy or any more civilization in the 20th century, or whether it's going to stop right here. One of the strange implications of the phonetic alphabet is private identity. Before literacy, before phonetic literacy, there had been no private identity. There had only been the tribal group. Homer knows nothing about private identity. Homer's world of the acoustic epic, the tribal encyclopedia of memorized wisdom, which Eric Havelock has reported so ably in his preface to Plato. The Homeric epics were part of this acoustic wisdom that preceded literacy and which were phased out by literacy. Homer was wiped off by literacy. Homer had been the educational establishment of the Greeks for centuries. An educated Greek was one who had memorized Homer, who could sing it to his guitar or harp and perform it in public. He was a gentleman and a free man. Along came the phonetic alphabet, and it said, and Plato seized upon it and said, let us abandon Homer and go for rational education. Plato's war on the poets was not a war on poetry, but a war on the oral tradition of education. Now today, everyone in this room is being subjected to a new form of oral education. Literacy is still officially the educational establishment, but unofficially the oral forms are coming up very fast. This is the meaning of rock. It is a kind of education based upon an oral tradition, an acoustic experience which is quite strangely remote from literacy. Rock is a kind of central oral form of education which threatens the whole educational establishment. If Homer was wiped out by literacy, literacy can be wiped out by rock. We're playing the old story backwards, but you should know what the stakes are. The stakes are civilization and versus tribalism and groupism, private identity versus corporate identity, and private responsibility versus the group or tribal mandate.
She's been asleep for quite a while, you know.
If these people would just play the game, they'd get a lot more out of life.
Nevertheless, Mr. Helpman, there are those who maintain that the Ministry of Information has become too large and unwieldy.
David, in a free society, information's the name of the game. You can't win the game if you're a man short.
And the cost of it all, Deputy Minister, 7% of the gross national product.
I understand this concern on behalf of the taxpayer. People want value for money. That's why we always insist on the principle of information retrieval charges. It's absolutely right there that those found guilty should pay for their periods of detention and for the information retrieval procedures used in their interrogation.
Do you believe that the government is winning the battle against terrorists?
Oh, yes. Our morale is much higher there. We're fielding all their strokes, running a lot of them out, and pretty consistently knocking them aside. I'd say they're nearly out of the game.
Stop. Pull back.
Have to subsidize criminals.
Mr. Helpman, the bombing campaign is now in its 13th
45 right.
Beginner's luck.
Stop.
Thank
Center
you very
is down.
much, Deputy Minister. Thank you, David. And a very Merry Christmas to you all.
Enhance 34 to 36. Hand right and pull back.
This is where Second Life can become the next generation of the web, where instead of logging into Amazon on a 2D web interface, you can actually go into a virtual version of Amazon and you can look at the book that you want to get and then you can order it.
Ian Dibble was clever enough to sell his book about virtual economies. There are many different ways to make money in these virtual economy.
He's selling a copy of his book in Second Life. It's the full book, and he'll autograph it for you because there's technology where his avatar can autograph the book.
The financial establishment is starting to pay attention.
Put these things on.
It's going to shut down the courts. They have no money to pay anybody to be a judge. What's that going to do to law and order? There is no money, and that is the effect of the chip landscape that's built up over the last 15 years. So what is your generation going to do about that? You're going to have to make your own space, make your own economy. That's what you're going to have to do it yourself. You probably heard of Douglas Rushkoff. He's an acquaintance of mine, and he's part of a movement called Do It Yourself over on the East Coast. And they are trying to figure out how to have local currencies and all this stuff. And those are people in their 30s and 40s. So it'd be very interesting to see what a 15-year-old, not what a 15-year-old would think, how they would express themselves if these kind of notions were presented to them. What would they think they were made up of?
Is that barter? Does he want to go into barter?
Yeah, it's kind of barter. It's like improvise anything on a local level and don't engage in national currencies.
Well, it's sort of...
He did a speech on that the artist the artist's role to the audience is really in jeopardy now because anybody can make their own quote art, with their Web 2.0 media. So, what did he say? He had a pattern. He said, today a young kid, they're all involved in games. So they buy a game, they get a package from some big company, they try to figure out the game themselves without taking the instructions. And if that fails and they can't get very high up in the game, they then go to websites that cheat, that give you the way to break through that game. There's some websites that tell you how this particular game can be beaten. So they give up and cheat. Then they figure out the game, once they've mastered it, and then they change the game. And then they send their changed version, by changing the program software, they send their changed game to the company that made the game. And if they're lucky, the company will say, you're really good, you've added to this, we want you to come work for us, because you're a good programmer. And so the kid becomes employed at a software games company. He's now a robot at game, but he got there by his own innovation. So look at what is he? Is he a producer or consumer? He's both. And yet he is looking for a position in the Android meme that he can get paid. That's what's happening.
That was good, Bob. I wanted to thank again Doug and Rock for having us here. And this space is sort of like that sensibility where anyone can come in here and show their films. They don't have to have a schedule or admission fee or, like the way most experimental film has been handled for the last 50 years, where it's, a gatekeeper says what's good and we're going to show this and here's the schedule and blah, blah, blah. So they've sort of had this idea here in this very space that we could just come in here and do this. So we did sort of promise on our PR that we'd talk a little about experimental filmmaking, and you've had encounters with Michael Snow. And Michael Snow's famous film Wavelength caused Pat O'Neill, another important experimental filmmaker, to say that Michael Snow turned the whole screening room into the camera. So maybe you could talk about what we're into right now and how this statement could be made about Michael Snow and your encounters with him.
Yeah, I last talked to Michael Snow about 4 years ago in New York City, in 2005 or 6. He had a show at the MoMA, Museum of Modern Art, had a retrospective of his work. And I think more of his film Rameau's Nephew, which was done in the 70s, and I saw its premiere in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And so I talked about that film with him after that memorial to his art creativity. And I was pointing out how he was doing Finnegan's Wake, but didn't know it. And he said he wasn't sure what I meant, and then I explained it using McLuhan, who he was familiar with, and then it made sense to him. And he says, yes, that's what I was doing. But the main thing I brought up to him, I said, you as an artist are an appendage of the universities. You are brought in by art school teachers who need to show there's some public space out there making art. So they bring you in and they show your films and they discuss it. And then you go home and the professor's got a job and you've got to hustle around and get another gig up to show something and make some money on your personal art. But the professor continues. And I said, you know who started that? And I said, I witnessed it at the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design in '72 when Peggy Gale came down and started the Canada Council of Arts, where they started giving grants to artists. And these artists come and go while she remains the manager of the Council of Arts for 30 years almost. So I was saying that what you have been a victim of was started by Peggy Gale. Now, he didn't know whether I knew this or not, but I knew Peggy Gale was Michael Snow's wife. So I'm there complaining, so to speak, about Peggy and how he's a dupe of Peggy, and he's looking at me trying to figure out whether I know whether I put my foot in my mouth or not or what. And all he did, he resolved it by saying, yeah, you're right.
If you physically look at the front page of the New York Times or any other newspaper, what you will discover is a story here about something that's happening in Bonn at the moment, a story down in the lower right-hand corner about how the crime rate on the east side of New York City is increasing, a story in the upper right-hand column about Governor Brown in California.
Inflation.
A story someplace else about inflation. Observation is being made that there once was a time in journalism, pre-telegram, when all of this stuff would have been connected in long essays, and with the telegram coming in, and UP, etc., it's a paced-up job of stuff that has no connection.
Literally, the essays, the Spectator essays of Addison and Steele were newspapers. That's the form of the first newspapers. Essays. But they're editorials. The news came later. But at the speed of, by the way, simultaneous, that's a right hemisphere thing, that sort of thing. Stumping the experts was a normal activity of these old fun and game shows from the Hellenic times. This is where the Platonic dialogues began. They began as a way of putting down the highbrow. Now, that gimmick of putting down the highbrow, debunking the pretentious, comes right along through European tradition, out of the Orient, out of Hellenic times, and finally gets to forms we are familiar with: Don Quixote, Rabelais, Sterne's Tristram Shandy. These are direct descendants of the old carnivalistic debunking of the institutions of society.